guys, welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now,
Jimothy.
So ladies and gents, we are here. We are at Geek Retreat. Oh, I don't know if we can get it in. Geek Retreat Dudley, ladies and gents, and I'm actually back playing Despia. I've actually managed to make it to locals. This is 2 weeks in a row now, so I'm on a bit of a streak in terms of attendance, but nonetheless I am here. I believe I'm gonna play Branded Despia. I did have Mathmech with me, but I thought that Branded Despia might have a bit of a better lookout, mainly because I made a couple of additions to the deck. I've decided to play Dragoon, take out the raw lock, because I just feel like it's just susceptible to too much interruption. So I put Dragoon in, and as well as I've main deck Dimension Shifter, mainly because I'm expecting a lot of Tearlaments, Ishizu stuff. So I feel like the main deck shifter might play into my strategy, which is kind of like go second and just try and OTK as quickly as possible. But nonetheless, I'll get back to you after the rounds, ladies and gents. I'm not too sure when or where, sorry, but I'll get back to you. But anyway, I will catch you on the next one. Peace. So we are straight in, ladies and gents. This is round one, and I believe I'm facing off against a Sky Striker variant. I think it plays some Runick cards, but nevertheless I won the die roll, and I believe I opted to go second because of the way that my deck is composed. It's got quite a few going second cards, and Despia, as you know, can just OTK pretty quickly. So that was kind of like my theory behind the deck, and that's how I played it when I went to the regional, the 256 man regional that I went to last week, I believe. So he decides to go first, does his usual Sky Striker stuff, and then he goes end phase to search, and I chain D shifter, and then I managed to I believe I magnum his Sky Striker Ace Raid, which was in graveyard, which is massive. And bestials, ladies and gents, especially in this format, Owdlich, Sky Striker, anything that has light or darks engraved, even branded, to be fair, they just get absolutely destroyed by the bestial cards, because it just eliminates follow up, and it just puts a big body on board, bigger than most of the Sky Striker links, to be honest. So I did that in end phase, and then I proceeded to just push. I did have the Forbidden Droplets, and he did have Droll in hand, which he showed to the camera, which was crazy. But obviously Droll can't do anything under D shifter. I did go to Droplets one of his cards, but I realized I couldn't do that because I couldn't send to grave. So I basically attacked over one of his Sky Striker Ace monsters and just kind of left it at that. He did go to attack into one of my monsters. I did chain the droplets in the following turn after that, and to be honest, after that it was all she wrote. Going into game 2, ladies and gents, he actually opted for me to go first. He did have I believe he had Mystic Mine, but before he mined me, I actually set up my board and actually had Dragoon, and I believe I had Albion on field. Now he did Dark Ruler me, he set up Mystic Mine, and he set 2 cards. Now obviously that would have been a very strong kind of like opening type of thing, but I did have the Harpy's Feather Duster in hand, which was rough. So I managed to clear his field, and we all know, ladies and gents, Dragoon is a huge problem for Sky Strikers because it can't be targeted. It literally just sits on field, and they find it very difficult to out it. So yeah, that's all she wrote, ladies and gents, and that was the end of round 1. So straight into game 2, and I'm actually playing a mirror match, which is just a little bit crazy considering I thought Branded Despia had kind of fell off, but it seems to be rising in popularity again. But anyway, I managed to not win the die roll, and I think I went second as usual, but like I said previously, my deck is kind of designed to go second. My pros in Branded Despia player set up his usual board. I think he had like Mirror Jade or stuff on board, and it went into a super grind state. Loads of back and forth, like I was just hanging on by the skin of my teeth waiting to see a few cards, and I managed to get to a point where I could resolve a Branded Fusion in order to get into Mirror Jade, and then Mirror Jade eventually got me the Branded Retribution, and I also had a Branded Lost set up, which I think is absolutely crazy card. For a little bit I'd taken it out the deck because I thought, you know what, it's a little bit of a win more card, but in a grind state, especially if your opponent is low on resources, it's difficult to kind of like keep up with the advantage because the amount of searching it does, and being able to just keep drawing Albion and then getting a draw off Albion is just something that can't be overlooked. So I managed to set up Branded Lost, and because of that he wasn't able to respond to Guardian Chimera's effect on Fusion Summon. So I managed to clear his own branded retribution, which was like, oh sorry, branded banishment, which is the trap fusion card, which kind of put me in a game state where I could kind of OTK. And he did go to bring back the masquerade, but obviously that had been banished off branded banishment, so I managed to just get lethal there. Going into game 2, ladies and gents, once again a super grind state. I managed to see branded lost yet again, which this just proved to be just a super duper lifesaver. You can search Cartesia off it, which is something that I told my opponent, and he was kind of impressed about, and he was like, you know what, I'm gonna put it back in the side. But we got into a grind state, and this game actually went to time. I managed to branded banishment and then make a masquerade, the blazing dragon, and that's ultimately what killed him, because when it flipped back over to my turn after he did a few plays, I just had more life points than he did, because he burnt so much life points just using, well, just trying to play the game basically. A masquerade just literally taking his life points away. So all in all, another W. Was a difficult match, very much a grind state. So yeah, Despia can still grind, ladies and gents, they can still grind. So coming into round 3, I played against a deck that is tipped to be the tier 0 deck of the format, which is Ishizu Tearlaments, ladies and gents. And this is the deck that I really wanted to test against. I wanted to see what it can do. I wanted to see how far it goes, and boy was I surprised. The amount of effects and things that it can do on both players' turns is just absolutely ridiculous. I would suggest, if you can, get a pen and a piece of paper and just kind of try and keep track of the effects that are activating, and you can legally do this. I've actually asked the Konami sanctioned judge, and he said it's no problem being able to keep a game state correct, because Tearlament and the Ishizu cards do so much on both players' turns. It's very easy to miss some of the key effects, especially the effects to fuse, as well as the unsummon effect. So it's definitely worth keeping in mind, ladies and gents, if you really want to kind of like just play against Tearlaments effectively. But nonetheless, I actually lost game 1, and it was just a bit of a grind. The turn just lasts so long, it's absolutely ridiculous. If you're going second against this deck, you better bear in mind time, ladies and gents, because it will be a factor with the amount of things that they can do. But I lost game 1, he just did loads and loads and loads. He resolved so many cards, and he still had follow-up in his hand, so it was difficult for me to push through the board without like a 1-card board breaker. So I managed to lose game 1. Game 2, however, I actually drew into Dennis the Menace D-Shifter, and that just absolutely ended their turn, as D-Shifter will actually kill this deck. And if you can play D-Shifter, my advice would be to play D-Shifter, because it just turns their whole deck off, especially if they're playing the just the Tearlaments Ishizu version without much else. It just will turn the deck off, ladies and gents. And I actually managed to win that game. I kind of just beat over him, and then just had too much to resolve, especially as well as setting up a Mirror Jade, which has a field nuke in the end phase. It's just absolutely crazy. And then going into game 3, there wasn't much I could do. Time got caught in draw phase. I did have Super Poly. I was hoping to Garura into during the battle phase, just to be able to kind of like do a few things, but unfortunately time got caught, so it was actually ended in a draw, which wasn't too bad, because yeah, I'll tell you why later. But I'll just tell you now, the person that I drew to actually ended up winning the locals, which wasn't too bad, to be honest. So yeah, it is what it is, ladies and gents. On to the next one. So my penultimate round, and I'm facing off against Branded Tearlaments, and this is arguably one of my most difficult matchups, or difficult match per se, in this local specifically. It was so grinded, there was so much back and forth, and it actually came down to a dark hole, believe it or not. I didn't have Branded opening in graveyard to protect from the card destruction, and dark hole literally just wiped my field, as well as wiping their own field, but being able to resolve, obviously kick Kalos, and then just basically the snowball from there. So it was interesting that my deck actually lost to a card that's been out more or less since the start of the game, which was just absolutely crazy. But I think the reason why I like Despia and Sword Soul so much now specifically is because their deck sets up a field that doesn't necessarily have a whole load of negates. It has a lot of interaction, but it's not necessarily negates, so you have to kind of like tactically maneuver around the board to not be able to just get wiped out basically. And I think that's why I enjoyed this match so much, because there was a lot of thinking, there was a lot of sequencing that could have potentially went differently, and it just meant that obviously I lost that initial game. But Dark Hole was a nice little tech, and then in game 2 I believe I just burnt myself to death with Masquerade. Time was due. It was basically we could have drew that game. I could have went into time. I could have just not played, but what happened was he actually branded Banishment, and I think I had Aluba on field, and he used Aluba and another monster to go into Masquerade, but in my own head, well, he brought back Albion using Branded Banishment, and I thought that he fused into Albion using Aluba and another card, and not fused into Masquerade. So I'm just playing freely, thinking, you know what, I've got this in the bag, I can just do exactly what I want, not knowing that I was just burning off Masquerade's effect. And it actually went down to time and actually just killed myself. I think we only had like 2 or so minutes left, and my opponent said if you did just stop playing, you would have won the game. I was ahead on life points. I did a bit of damage. I couldn't really do much else apart from, I think I summoned Mirror Jade. The Mirror Jade would have just wiped his field. He didn't have Branded opening in Graveyard, so it was a little bit on me why I lost that game. But I think it's because time was being called and I just not read the situation correctly. So all in all, it was a really good locals. It was good to play some more Yu-Gi-Oh, and I definitely will be playing this deck again. I think going forward I need to kind of like review what deck I'm going to be using, mainly because the format's changed somewhat, and Tearlament Ishizu is just going to be the deck to be, and I need a deck that can kind of like combat that but not necessarily be that deck. So yeah, we'll see how this goes, ladies and gents. We will see how this goes, but catch you on the next one. Okay, ladies and gents, we are back after locals. It was a very much enjoyable experience, and I played Ishizu Tearlament, which is a deck that I really wanted to test against, to be honest. I just wanted to see how much the deck can do, and it does do a lot, put it that way. The grind game is almost infinite. I can see why it's going to be like a tier 0 deck, because there's so much disruption, and the way that Yu-Gi-Oh plays now with the graveyards, it's absolutely crazy. But I didn't really get to record much between rounds. Most of my rounds were going to time, and I finished with a record of X11. So I drew one on the last one. I was on a bit of a tear to start off with. I went XO and then I drew, and then I lost one in time. I probably could have drawn that game as well if I did sequence my effects correctly, but because it was under time and I knew time was drawing closely, I should have just not played basically, and I just burnt myself to death through Masquerade on my opponent's turn, which you've probably seen in the footage. But nevertheless, Branded Despia is still very strong. So certain things that I've noticed about the meta, ladies and gents: Bestials are everywhere, so end phase Albion is just a very difficult thing to resolve, especially when they know what it does. They're just not going to let that resolve, to be honest. And the Bestials themselves are just big beat sticks. They're difficult to get over. They do provide super poly food, which is always nice, but it's still a bit of a problem. And the banishing of Albion before the end phase, it hurts so much because it kind of kills your follow-up basically. So yeah, it's a little bit of a difficult one, but nonetheless, I had fun. It was good to be at locals once again, and I'm definitely going to try and make it again next week. Hopefully I can try and do some testing in the week and try and formulate a plan of what deck I'm planning to play, because I do like Branded Despia, but I just feel like the Ishizu matchup is really difficult. The only reason I did so well against the Ishizu match was because of D-Shifter, and fortunately enough, Branded Despia can play under Shifter okay, especially going second, because they can put damage on board and set up Masquerade, which then puts your opponent under pressure. But if you don't see Shifter, you've literally lost the grind game, especially with how like Albion works and all that kind of stuff. So it's definitely something to bear in mind. But anyway, we find ourselves at the end of another video. As always, if you did enjoy this content, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that beautiful good stuff, and I would definitely see you guys in the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.